Avatar is like NASA, and other productions are like SpaceX.
If we'd done this on wires, it would look hokey. If we tried to do this any other way instead of being legit, it wouldn't be a James Cameron film.
Well, Ben, you worked on Avatar: Way of the Water. You also worked on the first one a long time ago as in a different role, correct?
Indeed, indeed, as a more of a concept illustrator.
Oh, nice. So
Yeah.
this is you were promoted.
I was promoted. Promotion from within is something has been done on Avatar in many departments, and it's kind of a nice thing to know that there's that level of kind of loyalty and continuity in the production.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful to know that people can move up in the industry. Well, we know what production designers do, like in the live action. So can you explain what they do in this digital world? Because, you know, James Cameron is doing, I mean, he's not the first to do this kind of thing, but the way he approached it is different, right?
Of course, of course. You know, we approach things sort of at a high level, you know, kind of a conceptual level, and in terms of the larger world that the designs fit into, right? Not just in terms of the, you know, the look of things or sort of visual themes that we want to convey with the designs or families of design. Obviously, we have two sides. We've got the organic side of Pandora, and that Dylan Cole is my co-designer who handles that stuff, and Navi architecture. We've got the human side, which is what I specialize in, all the hardcore kind of equipment. We've got those different looks, but we're also thinking in terms of literally providing more physical reality to Jim, to choose his angles, to choose what he wants to emphasize in an environment, you know, as opposed to kind of building around the script, building very literally around what we imagine the camera framing to be. So, so we, you know, for example, the Bridgehead City that we see in Avatar 2, the new human base, you know, we built that in a way where Jim could have gone to a lot of places in that thing and found like awesome angles down on the streets, or flying past it this way, or this, that, and the other. We try to build in as many opportunities as possible for him as a filmmaker. As we invest that level of kind of imagination in ourselves to sort of think of it as a real place, or any of the designs, right? Think of something as a real animal, a real creature. Think of a character as being a real person. In the case of the Tulkun, they're kind of both, right? They're characters and creatures at the same time. I think that the, you know, the mandate and the sort of approach on Avatar is to think of everything as being real. So you kind of have to go paint past the corners of everything a little bit and make that world feel more expansive than what will literally be seen in the frame. And partly that's because Jim is going to decide what he wants to emphasize. And part of it, I think, we like to say, after all the years we put into these designs, we would like to think that there's an unconscious effect on the audience, that they can sense that there's a bigger world out there, that Pandora, it feels as if we you know, Pandora's real and we went there and shot, you know. And I think you can't, you know, there's an integrated quality of design and a sort of integrity of thought behind it, that enables that you can't do by just kind of picking and choosing the things you want to work on. You have to think of it as being a broader palette.
Yeah, especially in the 3D, where how I watched it. I mean, so immersive. Actually, I watched it on the television because it's already available on digital.
Yeah.
And I mean, it still looks so immersive. I mean, that's just a great accomplishment, because sometimes you'll notice when you watch it on the big screen and then you watch it on TV, you're like, oh, it's not the same. But you still see this immersiveness, and I'm like, wow, it still looks like I saw it in 3D.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah. I mean, you know, as 3D rendering gets better and better, obviously there's so many technical things that Weta Effects did on these movies or I'm sorry, on this new movie, but they're already starting on the next one, as we all are, you know, that are incredible pure technical achievements, in terms of like simulating water and all that stuff. And all of those things play into the perception of reality and in an incredible level. But in the art department, our job is to make sure that we are also supporting the reality of things, as I said, by providing designs that have little indications of that they have a life beyond what's on screen. And one example I love to give is you know, Jim, when he was reviewing early designs of Metcaina village architecture, right, the reef people architecture, he asked for a bunch of flaps to be added at the tops of the structures, for the monsoon season, right? You need an ability. There's going to be wind and driven rain. You need an ability to close off these structures and make them livable year round. There's no monsoon season scene in any of the scripts, right? But that's just a little telltale detail, and that I think unconsciously communicates that it's a real place.
Yeah, I mean, and you get hints of Polynesian culture, sort of, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. No, there's all kinds of different cultural references. You know, I think the attempt is to celebrate kind of all indigenous cultures in some sense. The research is done all around the world, obviously, because it's an ocean going thing. There is a Polynesian bent to it. Also, we shoot our live action photography in New Zealand, right? So there is a connection, a personal connection in the production to the Maori people that we know there and that we work with there. And Cliff Curtis, of course, plays Tonawari, and he is Maori. So I think there's both a broadness of influence, and there is a little bit of a specificity there too, which is nice.
Yeah, it just reminded me, because then it just brings you back down to reality. You're like, oh yeah, indigenous.
Yeah, I mean, everything we do, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but everything we
sorry.
do, it's not intended to be pure fantasy that dislocates the audience, right? Because it's easy enough. I mean, we're designing, we've got the broadest palette and mandate to design a crazy alien world, right? If we wanted to, we could make everything really weird. And kind of test the audience as far as like, how alien are you ready to go? And of course, there's little things like the fact that, they've got this cue on their head that has strange little tendrils on the end of it, where it's like pushing the audience. It's like, do you think that's too weird? Is that creepy? So Jake says it's creepy, as the audience, to kind of help them process that in Avatar 1, right? So those little things. But in general, what you find is that there's some sort of real world Earth metaphor or analog to the things, that the Thanator is essentially a tiger, a jungle tiger or a jaguar or something like that. The Tokun they are not whales, but they're whale-like. They provoke the neurons in our brains that have an affection for whales and understand what those things are. And so if you study it, it's not that alien. It's just the right amount that I think people can accept these things, and it plays with their existing emotions for Earth. And that's partly why people love Pandora. Is kind of like you already love Earth, like you probably already watched beautiful National Geographic stuff, and we're tweaking those neurons to sort of kind of reframe it a little bit and give you that love all over again.
Well, that leads into my next question. A lot of the human activity takes place on the ocean. And like you said, there's so much relatability because of the whale hunting, and it's like, oh, it breaks your heart because it's real. It happens in real life. It's just really heartbreaking.
That is true.
So what was it like for you, handling, I mean, it was mostly land in the first one.
Yeah.
You were in a different capacity, but in this one, how did the water element add complications?
It was, well, I mean, it was an opportunity, it was a complication, it was an inspiration, it was all of the above, right? I mean, I think I'm not like a water person. I don't love being on boats. I get seasick a little bit, So I wasn't the guy for the job in that sense. But, with Jim, he has such an immense affection for the ocean, right? And so even though we're designing in many cases with the RDA vehicles that are designed to perform what I call high performance cruelty, which is sort of like the RDA design motto, they're doing bad stuff, but there's the high performance aspect of it, right? There's the fact that Jim loves the water. He's got boats and he loves to go out and jump them and do dangerous stuff, and that kind of kinetic excitement of sort of the high seas adventure, being a whaler, right, was something that that we embraced on our side. We don't on the RDA side of things, the designers, like, we almost all, like, we pretend that we work for the RDA. Like, what would the RDA do in this case? We're not, and that's part of the sort of reality approach to it. Is instead of saying, like, in a I don't know, in a more simplistic way, like, what's the scariest thing we can do for the cinematic frame? We're thinking about that. Like, the Sea Dragon needs to look intimidating, but it also needs to look really believable. And everything about it needs to be some engineered plausible behavior, right? Even though we've made it look like a manta ray and we've given it a face with an angry eye slit and all this sort of stuff that lets it telegraph its emotions properly, that there's a there's some thoughtful reality to it. But on a practical level, right, the water, I mean, I think everyone knows that we did performance capture underwater for the first time. Like, we essentially, Ryan Champney is one of our resident tech geniuses, invented and figured out the difficult problem of how do you performance capture not only underwater, but above water at the same time. How many scenes do we have where characters have to swim up to the surface, down from the surface, ride on a creature that's at the surface, and then it's not? Anyway, I'm not going to go into the technical details of that, but that was a huge thing to solve. And in terms of the design of the tank, in order to support the kind of wave action and various current modes of providing real water current against the actors, so that they simply wouldn't be able to do things that you can't do if you're in motion on a creature hauling ass through the water, right? You can't. I mean, Jim, again and again, he has so much experience with the water that he intuitively understands this, but he would explain it to us again and again. And he designed the production to basically not allow you to do stuff you can't do. Like, you cannot bring your spear forward at full tilt on an Elu,
Yeah.
right? You can't do it. You can't throw things or whatever it is. So all the behaviors when you see the Metcaina attacking, Mako subs and crab suits underwater, those are all achievable, like physically real. And I think every one of those little decisions that Jim has made as a filmmaker in terms of how we do these movies, I think adds up on top of the conceptual integrity, that we've done with the design. All those things add together to, I think, make it just feel more believable. I think people have this, like you say, this palpable sense of having an experience, a true experience, or witnessing something when you watch the movie, especially in the theater, but it's great, in any mode. That I think is kind of unique.
Right. Yeah, I think James Cameron is a merman.
Totally.
Well, because you add, how does motion capture work underwater? I'm sure they had to figure, that's not your department, but I'm sure they had to figure that out, because I'm assuming it's electronics. How do you make electronics and water don't mix?
It's true. They
right?
mix if you're very careful. Yeah. Think of putting, Sigourney Weaver underwater and having her perform, right? I don't know exactly how old she was when we were doing that capture, but she's not young. And she, like all the actors, had to learn how to do breath hold diving, how to free dive. There were things I saw stunt people do that I just defied belief. Avatar is the kind of project where you can attract the best of anybody in any given field to work on the thing. So we had like the best underwater free diver, like underwater parkour weirdos. Sorry if they're watching, I'm sure they're not. That the world has to offer. And these people could go do a fight scene underwater for 2 minutes straight.
Well, I heard Kate Winslet held her breath like 6 minutes or something. And I was like, I can't even hold it for 30 seconds. My God.
I know. But the amount of oxygen that you're burning through when you're doing the Jake and Quaritch fight, as the sea dragon is submerging, you think, we did that in little 15-second snippets and cut it all together. Nope. What you see on screen was contiguously captured.
Wow.
Yeah. But there was all kinds of amazing stuff that was done with the underwater cap. We had, basically we had vehicles that would serve as the creatures, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when someone is riding an Elu underwater in the movie and doing some sort of hydrobatic moves or arriving and grabbing another character, doing the things that they do, very often they were actually riding on top of another person, another diver, okay, who themselves had a little jetivator. I can't remember the names of the different vehicles, but think of it as an underwater James Bond, kind of torpedo thing that you hang on to that has its own propeller. Wow. So that person is driving their body around, right, in a sinuous way through the space. Another person is riding on them, right, holding onto a harness that's attached to the other person. Right. And it's like the stuff we do looks nuts on the day. It's like, wow, how is this even going to work? But it's so well thought through in terms of the motion that you get out of it, that what you see in the film feels totally natural.
It's insane. So 3 and 4, you're working on it. For us viewers, it's far away, but for you guys, you're still on it, right? So what are you now working on 3 and 4?
Absolutely. We did a broad pass at all the movies starting in late 2013, if you can believe it, because I know I've been on it for a while.
10 years ago.
Yeah. Because at that time, what the stories were defined and the new world was defined only in Jim's imagination. He had written 1,500 pages of notes on his thoughts for potential things to have in these new stories. He knew he wanted to tell a whole bunch of new stories and new films, but he had a writer's room that had only just started to kind of break out the entire arc of like, who are the new characters, what is their journey across all these different films and this big thing, but it hadn't yet been diced into films. So when we started working, there was a period of a couple of years almost where we were working across what we now know to be, all the way from Avatar 2 to Avatar 5. So we've done a lot of conceptual design way into the future of what any audience member might see. Currently, what we're concentrating on production-wise is the finishing off Avatar 3. So when we shot Avatar 2, both in terms of performance capture and live action, we concurrently shot 3. Those were ganged together in terms of production, the main actor production. But of course, with Avatar, there's so much digital, kind of assembly and wizardry and improvement of finding the exact facial performances that Jim wants for a certain scene, finding the exact, detailing of how we do the lighting and the virtual sets for a given scene that's going to end up being an all digital part of the film. All that needs to happen. And then Jim needs to go and shoot the movie all over again, effectively, right? When he does his virtual camera, those are the first cameras that are legitimately part of the film and legitimately can be handed off to Weta to start finishing as visual effects shots. And then, of course, their process, as you might imagine, at this level of fidelity is a slow and not easy process too. So all of that is in our future for Avatar 3. It's all already starting. We're already handing things off to Weta, and it's exciting to get into that. But we're also thinking ahead to the future movies.
And I mean, and technology is changing, but you guys are leading the ways. You guys are pretty much breaking the ground, and then everyone else is going to follow, right? So it's not like...
Well, I mean, the analogy I use, I don't know if anyone on the production would enjoy me using this analogy, but it's the way I think of it is Avatar is like NASA, and other productions are like SpaceX, right? So they can move faster than we can, and some innovations, I would say, within virtual production, certainly the use of the LED wall technology and trying to shoot, virtual extensions in camera, all that stuff. Those are all innovations that are happening in parallel with us and being adopted quickly by much shorter productions. So we're excited to see some of the good things that have come out of that world. And we're actually going to hopefully incorporate those things back in. At the same time, we're NASA. Right. So what we do, it's a little slower. It's a little more kind of thought through in terms of our approach. But we can do things SpaceX can't. Right. So it's a little more bespoke. It's a little more specific. But we're hoping to cross the streams a little bit and incorporate some of the newer advances that are happening outside too.
And really quickly, my last question.
Yeah.
Do you have to live now in New Zealand? Or do you commute back and forth?
Would not be a bad thing at all, but no.
I know, it's beautiful.
I'm in LA. I'm in LA. I was down there for 10 months in 2019 for our major live action shooting block. We ended up having 2 other really substantial live action shooting blocks after that, but I was there for, establishing most of the major high finish sets, et cetera. And it's a terrific place. It really is.
Yeah, it's on my bucket list.
I can't say enough good about the people, both to, as a great place to visit and to get to know them that way, but also to work with super professional crews, across the board in terms of live action fabrication, the set builds, the painting, the quality of the art department that we had down there. We had a sort of sister art department there, all the external companies. Anyway, really a pleasure to be there, and it's a cool place.
Well, thank you so much for the insight. I love learning about these behind the scenes little tidbits. So thank you so much.
Of course.
All right. Thank you.